Hello and welcome to the second episode of Machine Guns in Your Movies podcast. I'm Sasha.
And I'm Joel.
Before I tell which movie are we gonna discuss, I mean, obviously you already know that because you saw the title of this episode. But I want to say a couple of things. We're recording this on January 17th, 2025, and we are planning to publish our episodes bi-weekly, at least in the beginning. And second thing I wanted to mention, yesterday on January 16th, the David Lynch died, the great director David Lynch, and he was certainly someone who shaped a good part of my film taste, and someone whom I admired a lot and his films. And we will not do an episode about Lynch movies now. We are going to proceed with the episode as we planned, with the movie that we plan to cover. I don't think it's that problematic, but I don't want to talk right now about if a certain person, after a death of a certain person, that certain director that was very dear to me. I don't want to immediately make an episode about that. I'm not saying it feels exploitative or something, but it's kind of, we're certainly going to cover his films in the future, and we're going to talk about his films. But we thought that it would be a better option to simply do the movie that we plan to do today. And I mean, Lynch is certainly someone who deserves a lot of episodes, and he's somebody whose legacy will stay until there is there is cinema. So I mean, he's certainly one of my favorite directors, and I feel very sorry that he died. And but we're going to proceed with the movie that we originally planned to do. And any thoughts on this? Maybe on Lynch in general and on the.
Well, it's I like any good film buff or like any film buff worth his salt. Am indeed acquainted and I'm familiar with his the works of Mr. Lynch. I was shocked the other day when I found out he died. 78 isn't exactly young. He was almost 79, but all the same, you figured he would have had more years. He seems like a healthy guy who didn't have too many issues. I saw one of his, I don't want to spoil what it is, but he had a cameo in a film appearance in a movie a few years ago,
Uh-huh.
and I was also hoping he'd make another movie or two. Inland Empire, I wasn't too keen on, but I
Mhm.
am quite fond of some of his films, such as Elephant Man, Straight Story, and Eraserhead, and among others. And yeah, he was truly a one of a kind visionary. It's a bit of a pity he's been taken from us so soon, and well, soonish, I'd say. I'm in the sense that I wish he'd have gotten to make more movies. And yes,
Definitely.
I'd be open to rewatching some of his films to discuss it for this podcast. But man, I'm just it is incredible. The guy's a singular figure in the world of cinema. He really did make his mark, and it's I guess that's the best thing you can say about a guy, and he'll be missed.
Definitely. Yeah, some of my first. Basically, some of my first memories about television generally are connected with him. Actually, I mean, I remember when I was like 5, 6, something like that. I heard, I didn't saw, but I heard my parents talking about Twin Peaks, which they saw a year or two before that. And they were discussing this series, and then like I don't know, some 10 years later or something like that, I saw Twin Peaks, and I was mind blown. And then around that time I saw Lost Highway, which is still to this day my favorite Lynch film. And well, I mean, all of his other stuff really. Blue Velvet, I saw around that time. And you mentioned Inland Empire not being a big fan of. Yeah, Inland Empire was a film that I was also not a big fan of. There are some pretty interesting and creepy, disturbing moments in that film, but generally I was not like. But and the Dune, I was not a big on Dune, but maybe that's more because of my generally I was not interested that much in the material anyway. Plus, I think that he was pretty much like it was not really his own. I guess
It
we,
is officially technically an Alan Smithy movie, so there's that.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're definitely going to cover some of his movies in the future episodes. But for this episode, we decided to talk about a 1993 Joe Dante movie, Matinee.
Yeah.
A
You're at
movie.
you're at the Machine Guns in Your Movies podcast, where it's all Dick Miller all the time. Because I just noticed he's been in our first two episodes and 100% of our podcasts so far.
Matinee is now I'm talking like my personal opinion, like my favorite Joe Dante movie and one of my favorite movies of the 90s in general. And he didn't go into the genre, into the traditional genre territory in this film in a way that he did in some of his other, in the most of his other movies. This is more like a coming of age drama, basically, but fused with the style of the movies of the time of the movies of the time period that it describes, that it portrays, basically. So yeah, he kind of moved away a little bit from the genre when it comes to his direction and when it comes to the overall the movie, but the topic is very much connected to the genre of films he liked. I mean, Joe Dante liked as a kid, and that were very popular the end of the 50s and the beginning of the 60s. So any general opinions about the movie? Do you want to share first before we go into details?
I suppose we could. I was about to pounce on that, and it's something I noticed. It's when you hear about the movie Matinee and maybe see something, I wasn't very familiar or looked up any synopsis before I started watching the film, so it was a bit of a blind viewing for me. But it was pretty delightful. Like I won't say it's a complete strong masterpiece, but it was like a very well done coming of age movie with also like a lot of a bit of a somewhat, but it's both a slice of life. It's interesting because it's a slice of life film, but also a historical drama. It's made during the backdrop of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So there's that, and gives the film a very interesting and unique perspective feel to it, I'd say. But it also, Joe Dante, who normally almost virtually exclusively does sort of cinema fantastique films,
Yeah,
that is to say movies that are like in the fantasy, horror, science fiction, or
yeah.
sometimes mixtures of all three in some ways, those kinds of movies. It's very restrained this time. It's just basically slice of life, but yeah, it's just boys growing up in South Florida during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and as well as the subplot about a filmmaker, John Goodman with a very obvious stand-in for William Castle, showing a movie, one of his newest movies in cinemas, and all the gimmicks that he has employs in that film.
Yeah, as you said, yeah, it's he moved away, not a little bit, but completely from the genre territory when it comes to his when it comes to the direction, but not when it comes to the subject matter. Basically, it is a movie. It's a coming of age drama, but it's directed with his usual like energy and this kind of a childish kid energy that he always had in his films. And he always said that he basically directed films that he himself would want to see, that he never really directed a film that he himself wouldn't like, wouldn't want to see. So that has to do with also with the energy of the whole energy of the movie, I guess, and with the whole. There's a gags, there's a funny moments. It's certainly it's certainly not like a slice of life in the traditional sense of the word, but it is in a way that it's coming of age drama, and it's not, as Joel said, it's not like a horror, science fiction, or anything similar that he did before or after that movie. Yeah, the movie, when it comes to the plot, I'm just shortly gonna talk about the plot. The movie is set at the beginning of the 60s, 1962 to be more precise. during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it's on Florida, and it tells a story about a new kid in town, basically. Gene, played by Simon Fenton, and he's actually two new kids in town in a way. One is Gene, and his family, and his little brother and the mother, and his father is away on on the ships around Cuba, and he they are of course frightened about the whole situation, about political situation, and the news, and the generally that the media is fueling that in a way, and everybody's frightened, of course. And what I wanted to say, the other new kid in town is basically the director, not really when it comes to his age, but he's like this kind of a character who is like a big kid in a way. He's John Goodman's character, Lawrence Woolsey, who is obviously modeled after William Castle, and he's the basically the way he behaves, like his adventure spirit, his energy and enthusiasm, and the gimmicks that he employs, his reactions to the reactions of the public during the screening of his movie, all of that. He's like sometimes behaving like a big kid. We are seeing two things, like we are witnessing the actual the threat, the actual real threat when it comes to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and parallel to that, there is this fictional horror when it comes to the new movie that's coming to that Lawrence Woolsey is bringing to the town, his new project called Mant, about a guy who's been exposed to the radiation and is mutating into a big ant, and that's why the movie is called the Mant and Mant. And basically, there's that interplay between the reality and fiction, and how one comments on the other, basically, and how one reality of the that's one of the thematic levels of the film. I mean, we can go later to talk about that, but maybe we should mention it now. But basically, there is that element of the fictional horrors, like the ones depicted on screen, being good, being basically healing or helping, not really healing, but helping with coping with the actual real horrors, which would be their, like, the main one of their functions, and for the characters in this film. And as one of the characters says to Lawrence Woolsey, the theater owner, they say, like, we are in the middle of the chaos, we are in the middle of the crisis. You now want to show a horror movie? Said, exactly, that's a perfect time to show a horror movie. And that's basically, like, in a way, a good way of depicting the two of these, like, realities, and how one can help the characters cope with the other, basically.
Yeah, I just noticed that, and it's something that, as my co-host Sasha mentions, it's that, but it's also there was a bit of a there are several things that I observed about that. Just as like I recall in history reading about during the Great Depression and around that period, Americans, despite having a much lower and decreased income and financial stability, they were just as prone to go see movies as they ever were. I've heard, I'm not certain if this holds true in all cases, but America, generally speaking, people do like going to movies when there's some sort of trouble, or things are not, there's a sort of social crisis taking place. And that's what I remember hearing about it. So the movie kind of plays around with that theme. Basically, the characters are trying to cope through. It's sort of a in-universe irony. In essence, the characters are terrified they're going to get killed in a nuclear bomb, and they're watching a horror movie about somebody who gets mutated by atomic radiation. And it something an interest. Speaking of, not quite an irony, but just a funny coincidence, we're discussing a movie that's 30 years ago about it, that it itself is about an incident 30 years prior. So there's almost a bit of a it's almost a sort of nostalgiaception or something of that to that effect, because the movie's fairly old itself and the incident's about the same age. And yeah, I thought that was an interesting irony. And something I thought was odd, maybe my co-host will comment on this, but I thought that listening to it was really interesting. There's a scene in the theaters where they're watching a in color movie about some sort of shopping cart with magic powers. It seems to be one of those cheap, low budget, maybe some sort of goofy Disney movie that was released in live action Disney movie that was released in that time period about some sort of sentient shopping cart, if I'm not mistaken. But the way the cinematography and especially the sound mixing and the sound in that film and that film within a film is pitch perfect. Like it literally captures effectively the sound of what those movies were like in that time period. Same thing with the movie by John Goodman's character. It's Matt. It really does sound like a movie from the 50s. Frustratingly, the cinematography doesn't. The black and white cinematography doesn't quite match the look of those movies, but it is just mind blowing how close they are to it. And I thought that was a wonderful touch.
Yeah, they really tried to I mean, obviously Joe Dante is somebody who knows that period very well. He grew up during that period, and he himself saw and liked many of those movies, so he knows the look and the sound and the colors and everything about those movies basically. And as far as I know, they shot much more material when it comes to the Mant. There is additional footage on the Blu-ray of that film that I have. It's there of the much like a longer version of what we see in the film. So they didn't just shot the scenes that we see, but they shot more, and then they edited some of that into the film,
How
basically.
long?
And yeah, you wanted to
How,
mention something?
God, I was just curious. How long would you say is like the full? Is this practically like a episode of a movie or something? We do see a lot, huge chunks of man. So
I'm not exactly sure about the length. I need to check, but I think it's something like 30, 40 minutes. I'm not exactly sure, but they certainly shot more than what we have in what we see in the film. And yeah, basically, person mutating into an insect. I mean, there was obviously there was a fly in 1958. There was a dam about giant ants, so the giant insects, and yeah, I mean, there are several movies of that period that use that fear of the atomic energy, and they use the people's fear of the atomic bomb and of nuclear war and the radiation and what they will do, what the radiation will do to people, all of these things. And they played on that, and they used that as the one of the plot devices for the films, and it was fairly popular, basically type of uh, of movies. And of course, The Fly is not a movie about radiation, but there is a basically a lot of those movies were either like a mad scientist whose experiment going, or just a scientist whose experiment is going wrong, or we have some sort of exposure to radiation or something, some similar thing. So Joe Dante knows pretty well these kind of movies, and obviously the movies of William Castle. So he decided to focus basically on him, on his basically showmanship, on his persona, and to transport that into the character of Lawrence Woolsey. And John Goodman is of course great in that. Great in that role, and his girlfriend played by Cathy Moriarty. They're both. I mean, the things we see in the film are the actual things which are employed by William Castle in real life. I mean, for the haunted, for example, for the House on Haunted Hill, he had this. For most of his movies, he meant basically had a gimmick. And calling it in a certain calling it by a certain name ending with O. So for the House on Haunted Hill, he had a Merjo, where during the certain moment in the film, a skeleton, like a fake skeleton, would emerge above the audience, and basically scaring them, basically. And there was also during his movie The Tingler, about this kind of worm-like mutated thing who is getting attached to the people's spinal cord, if I remember, something like that. There is a and can be only is kind of grows. It feeds on fear, but and it can be only killed by screaming. And but for that movie, he had a gimmick that he called Percepto, which was basically he got vibrating motors, basically vibrating motor devices, and he put them under the seats of the theaters. Not all seats, but in the movie it's portrayed that he put them underneath every seat. But he was doing it in some theaters. He put it under, I don't know, every second or third seat or whatever. But he would during a certain part of the film, they would activate those devices, like we see in the Matinee, and they would give like vibrate the seats themselves and the seats. And it was not. There were some claims that these devices produced electric shocks, like electric jolts, which is not true. They were just vibrating the seat, like to basically make the audience jump and in sync with what's going on at that moment in the film. So he used a lot of these things, and we see that in Matinee, and basically everything we see he really did the William Castle in real life.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic that we will end up watching this film. It creates I saw a movie called Polyester by John Waters not too long ago, and that too had a sort of smell-o-vision. You had like a sort of scratch and sniff card where you scratch it, you get a certain kind of smell, some less pleasant than others. But it also, yeah, when you mentioned about William Castle makes it interesting. It adds a special layer to an element to the nostalgia, as it were, because these are elements that I read about these, and they sound extremely fascinating, but they'd be almost impossible to replicate it. I assume that William Castle had no idea of the coming advent of home media such as VHSs, DVDs, eventually streaming service, obviously, but it sort of creates a sort of lost element that can never be truly replicated in his films. And yeah, I think that is an interesting element as a background to the film itself. But because I do remember hearing about the Tingler, but yeah, and do you want to? Do you mind if we discuss spoilers at this point?
Yeah, we can. Just one more thing. When it comes to William Castle, yeah, obviously John Waters is another one who himself said that he's a fan of William Castle, and there is a pretty good documentary called "The Spine Tingler: A William Castle Story" for those who want to watch to know. I mean, for those who haven't seen his films, yeah, you can check his films. Some of his films are pretty okayish. Some of them are pretty bad when it comes to the films themselves. But these gimmicks are always very entertaining anyway. But there's this documentary about him who is the documentary is pretty good, and John Waters is one of those who was being interviewed, and yeah, he basically paid homage to William Castle with that in Polyester. And that's so yeah, we can when it comes to I just wanted to mention a couple of more things. When it comes to the characters, the film is basically packed with several recurring actors from Joe Dante movies. He always gave roles to either from the people that were active during the period where he was a kid and watched those movies. That people that acted in those movies, he gave roles to that in his films, or from the yeah. So I mean, there's Dick Miller, obviously, who is had parts in all of his films, and who played in Roger Corman movies. He was in A Little Shop of Horrors. He was in A Bucket of Blood, and yeah, he had these basically several of these. Not cameo, yeah, but they're cameo, and he plays Herb Dennings, one of the two guys who protest, like a fake protesters against the movie, who he employed by Lawrence Woolsey himself to protest and to bring more publicity to his film. And and the other guy, Bob, who is also protesting, is played by John Sayles, the great screenplay writer and the director, who is also who did also screenplay for some other Joe Dante movies, like for the Howling and for the Piranha, and he himself is a very good screenplay writer and the director himself. He did Lone Star. He did. Brother from Another Planet. He did Secret of Rowan Einish and several other films. He was he's pretty much like he's very, like, how to say, his films are very uh, political, and he's a very pretty much in sync with Joe Dante when it comes to the politics. And he himself is a pretty good director generally, and he plays the other protester, Bob, in the film. Yeah, and there's another connection with there is one connection with other Joe Dante, not in this case movies, but the series. The kid who plays the character of Stan, the friend from school of the main character, was played a main character, the main kid in the a couple of years before. Matinee played the main character in the series Erie, Indiana, which I believe we both know. And yeah, he plays the character of Stan, of the character of the friend of the main character.
Yes, and somebody else who's also worked in a lot of Joe Dante movies would be Robert Picardo,
Yeah,
best known to a lot of viewers as the hologram doctor from Star Trek Voyager, but
yes,
he's also been in things like Howling, Inner Space, Gremlins 2, and even Small Soldiers. So he's been in quite a few movies by directed by Joe Dante. So yes, it's another of his regulars in the film.
yeah. Yeah, it's when it comes to that way, it's typical Dante cast. Yeah, so the movie unfolds basically, and the two parallel, like one actual threat and a real threat, and the other imagined and not real. I mean, the one who is a real, the one threat which is a real threat, and the other which is not threat at all, which is quite the opposite, which is a good cure for at least in a psychological cure for the real threat. And so the movie basically there is a the theater is packed, the movie starts, and the main drama unfolds during that period, during that part of the movie. It's basically the last, not just the last third of the movie, the last two-thirds of the movie, no, but the second half of the movie is basically one big prolonged scene in the theater. And a lot of the things happen during that time. We see like this kind of a chaos, and characters running around being frightened by thinking that they hear nuclear explosions outside, but they're really hearing the shaking from the buzzers from underneath the seats, and from the gimmicks that Lawrence Woolsey is employing. And yeah, there is basically the and here I want to mention also the character of the I forget his actual name, but he plays the boyfriend of one of the girls from school, and from of the where main character goes, and he has Lawrence Woolsey employs him to scare the audience at certain parts, to be in a costume of the ant and ant monster and scare the audience,
Harvey?
and to start what? Sorry?
Is it Harvey? Because apparently his
Harvey,
name
right.
is there, but yeah, I didn't like that care much for that character. He's a bit of a weak part of the movie, if you ask me. But yeah.
When it comes to him, yeah, what I thought about him basically when we first see him, the threatening Stan to stop seeing his girlfriend. There is I'm not sure if that was intentional, but it looks like to me like basically when he's reciting his poetry that Dante was kind of that Dante was trying to make fun a little bit of the Charles Bukowski poetry, because his poetry sound like Charles Bukowski poetry in a way. I mean, I'm a big fan of Bukowski generally, both of his poetry and prose. But the thing that the character of Harvey wrote sounds like something that Bukowski might, like a bad version of something that Bukowski might do. So yeah, that maybe that was intentional, maybe not, but that's one of the things. And he is portrayed as the real threat, let's say, in these parts of the movie. Basically, he causes lots of the trouble basically by overdoing these effects. He causes part of the theater to break and puts in danger the younger brother of the main character. And basically that's so in these there's like a huge confusion, basically like a one big Looney Tune, prolonged Looney Tune cartoon. There's a big confusion and running around, and in these moments we kind of see that the real threat comes from the actual real people, not from the from the outside, not from the movie itself. And there's this in the end there's these moments when one of the kids is so delighted by the movie, says, man, I'm seeing this thing twice, and like he wants to see it again because of all the excitement and everything. So basically they forgot about for a moment about the actual threat, or learned in a way to cope with it through the fictional threat portrayed on the screen in a way. So yeah, I mean this and yeah, that's basically that takes a good part of the movie. That the scene in the theater, it's basically in a way a um, central part of the movie. Any comments on that?
Well, it's interesting. You're mentioning a lot of the stories of the film. It's like I would say another weakness of mine is like I think no, sorry, another weakness I feel that the film suffers from would be, I don't know, it gets a bit wacky when everyone's just running around in the movie theater. But
Mm.
I do really find it charming to like John Goodman is just wonderful as
Mhm.
Lawrence, and Woolsey, and that ending at the scene where he fakes people into thinking there's a nuclear war is just like it's just magnificent. But yeah, it's a bit difficult to summarize the film too much because there's numerous many characters and it doesn't quite follow a three-act structure per se. There's a lot of concurring events going on and from multiple different angles, so it's a bit difficult to summarize it at that one. There is a crescendoing intensity, obviously. It's going through the Cuban Missile Crisis, and there is the issue about what's going on in movies. But yeah, no, the ending is very, very, very well faithfully done. And did you, since we're in the spoiler territories, do you want to tell me your interpretation of the very last shot of the ending?
Yeah, well, I mean, now if you want to talk about the ending, now we're entering the spoiler territory. I mean, we spoiled basically the things we talked about so far were pretty much something you can read everywhere about when they talk about the film. But now we're going into the. I mean, it's not really a spoiler because it's it ends the way people might expect when it comes to the things happening on screen. But I want to give my interpretation of it. So yeah, spoiler alert for the next few minutes for those who haven't seen the film. Basically, the film ends in a way that the main character and his now a girlfriend from school, the girl from school, and they are saying goodbye to the director and his girlfriend, who are driving away to another city with their film. And although they will have more screenings in the same city, but yeah, they're driving away, and the director is Lawrence Woolsey is commenting how that in a few years probably there's going to be another crisis. Basically, the media will all of the like they will start another this hysteria and putting people into hysteria, and that there will be probably another crisis. And the last moments of the film depict the kids on the beach basically looking at the helicopters and the planes, Navy helicopters arriving, and the main character is basically like expecting his father to come back, and he is. And in the background, we hear the song, which is repeated through the film several times. It's like a motif in the film, the song "The Lion Sleeps Tonight," basically. And we hear that song in the jungle, the quiet jungle. The lion sleeps tonight, and we see the helicopter and arriving, and you can interpret that as yeah. When it comes to the narrative of the film, basically yes, the father of the main character is coming back home. The Cuban Missile Crisis is over. The both Soviets and the United States signed an agreement not to press the red button, and yeah, and the father of the main character is coming back. But basically, the very last shot of the film, we see the helicopter filling up the screen in basically nothing. We don't see anything else, but there is extreme close up on the helicopter, and for the very last second, the song stops. Of the before the end credits, the song stops, and all we see is all we see is the helicopter, and then there is a black screen, and all we hear is the sound of the helicopter. So basically, it's 1962, and given the age of the characters, who are 13, 14 years old, we basically get a sense that yeah, in a few years, and seeing this helicopter, we get a sense that in a few years these kids might be sent to Vietnam. So the ending is, in my opinion, foreshadowing the future events. And given what the director said, the Lawrence Woolsey said, that a couple of minutes before that, basically about a new crisis and everything. We get the sense that in a few years, the Gene, his character, might be sent to Vietnam. I mean, based on what we see. So there is that kind of the ending might look like this kind of a sweet, okay, happy ending, but it's more not just bittersweet, but it's more like a pretty dark ending when you look at it that way. And that's pretty much my interpretation of that ending.
That actually reminds me of a 1980, I think it's mid-80s Soviet film called Courier. And at one point, it's like it has, I don't want to give too much away for that one, but like there is a similar attitude. It's like the main character is sort of a layabout who does nothing, and he's thinking of getting into the army. And at one point, he sees a man who's missing an arm from it, obviously from that country's unsuccessful intervention in Afghanistan. And he ends up thinking of joining him, and it has like darker implications when you consider how that war turns out. But that's an interesting ending. It almost feels like a bit like companion piece to The Graduate, that infamous ending where it looks happy, but then all of a sudden they discover it's like this isn't quite as nice as we thought it was. And yeah, I didn't think about that. I just considered it as it's a very pleasant movie, so it's just funny to think of it that way. But I know for a fact that Sasha and I have discussed this, but he actually managed to rank the top 5 political films but in terms of politics from Joe Dante. So he has deeply thought about this, and I'm kind of impressed at how much he's gone into detail. But yeah, no, it is fascinating to look at. And yeah, that's about. Well, I'm not certain if Sasha has anything further to say. That's about my thoughts on Matinee. It's not quite what I expected, but it's is something that I enjoyed. I will say that.
Yeah, that's maybe a couple of more things, but that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Also, uh, yeah, I would say that in all of his films, Joe Dante was political. I mean, in some of the films, yeah, from the from the Masters of Horror series, he was very much like in your face, directly, intentionally political. But Homecoming, but in some of the others, like in the Small Soldiers, and he he was pretty consistent when it comes to his satire and the political satire, starting from Piranha and everything. I mean, he was pretty consistent in that. So, and Matinee is, I think, it's a pretty clever uses it in a pretty clever way, and it's a very layered in that way. And I would say it's also layered in a way that he treats also people from that I would say his side of the political spectrum in a way. I don't want to go too much into politics really here of the political opinions, but basically the parents of the girl with whom the Jean falls in love with, the main character falls in love with, are portrayed as this as the people who would be critical of the government and of somebody who would. I would say that he kind of poked fun a little bit at them too, like at the liberal side, in a way that he basically was saying that, yeah, they mean well, but sometimes they're like they are getting lost a little bit into their own theories in a way sometimes. So he was like playfully poking fun at them too. So I mean, and that would be also part of his, I would say, layered approach. I mean, he would generally agree with them, but it was like he would not. He would be. He was against like preaching, but he was poking fun at preaching itself in a way. Yeah, but generally he was always his movies always had that element of political satire, or more or less, some of them much less, and some of them more. But yeah, there is that element present. So yeah, that's pretty much, as I said, probably my favorite of Dante movies, and I think it's yeah, his best work. Yeah, that would be pretty much it when it comes to this episode. Any closing thoughts? Anything you wanted to add?
Well, personally, it'd probably be have to say that I don't think anything will top Gremlins 1 and 2. Those are like childhood masterpieces for me. But yeah,
Yeah,
no, I really did enjoy Matinee. It's an underrated film. Unfortunately, it bombed at the box office, so there wasn't much of a follow-up. Joe Dante's always had mixed results at the box office, but I don't think it deserved to. It was a bit of an odd movie though, so it could explain why they'd had difficulty finding its audiences, but it definitely deserves to, and we hope that anyone listening to this will be enticed to go out and seek it, assuming we haven't spoiled everything.
yeah, we said when we had yeah, we warned you when we had the spoilers. Yeah, definitely go check it out. It's not typical Dante movie when it comes to the genre, but it is typical Dante movie when it comes to the relationship with the genre and with the movies he likes. And so yeah, it is. So in that way, it is his, and it is definitely his own um, author movie. Yeah, that would be all for today's episode, and expect a new episode in 2 weeks. That will 2 week period will be our time frame for at least for some time. Maybe we'll change that. We'll see, but for some time we'll do it that way. And thank you for listening, and expect a new episode soon.
You
Thank you,
guys,
and bye.
bye.